Pattern breakers. A white rapper goes on a major platform and says their new music got blacker. Not I studied the roots, not I worked with more black producers, not I learned how to hold the groove differently. Nope, just I got blacker. And if your stomach did a little flip when you heard that, good, because that means your instincts is working. Because the second somebody can treat blackness like a setting you turn up in the studio, we're not just talking about music. We're talking about power. We're talking about who gets to try on identity for credibility and who has to live with the consequences. Now, how about this? If somebody can put blackness on when it's profitable and then take it off when it's inconvenient, what exactly are they appreciating? And here's the follow up. When white artists borrow the sound, the slang, the aesthetics, the posture, and even the attitude, is that cultural expression or is that extraction with better lighting? I'll let you be the judge of that. Welcome back to Blk By Design. I'm your host, Will on the mic, and I'm breaking down Black history and identity with a little bit of sass and a whole lot of shade. Today's episode is Appreciation versus Appropriation. And I want to be clear about what we're doing here, because sometimes these conversations get stuck at the level of, did they mean well? I'm not doing intentions today. I'm doing structure. We're going to start with the Jack Harlow Popcast moment, because it's a clean example of how people talk when they believe culture is accessible, but the people is negotiable. Then we're going to zoom out a bit, because once you see the pattern, you'll realize that this didn't just start with Jack Harlow. It didn't just start with hip hop. This has been an American tradition. And then we're going to connect that to the film world, because it's the same logic. It's just wearing a tux at the Oscars, if you know what I'm saying. You know, Ryan Coogler not winning Best Director at the 98th Academy Awards, even though Sinners was the most nominated film of the night. I mean, come on. Like, what? I know the whole entire Black Twitter, the Black threads, we were all in unison when they finally won, and we were all said, finally. I mean, I yelled at the screen and said, finally, when Sinners first won an award, because they kept playing in Sinners' faces, you know? That first Delroy Lindo snub, but, I digress. But the question underneath both stories is the same. It is, what happens when whiteness wants black culture, but doesn't want to be decentered by black people? But before we get into all of that, we have to do some quick housekeeping. If you like this kind of conversation, subscribe wherever you're listening. If you're on YouTube, like, comment, and become a pattern breaker by hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell so you never miss a single episode. And then lastly, I need you to send this episode to the friend who always says, it's not that serious, it's not that deep. Well, guess what? It is. And I'm going to show you why it is. Okay? Let's get right into it. Appreciation versus appropriation. People love to turn this into a feelings conversation when you hear that. Especially this Jack Harlow situation. Do they love the culture? Are they a fan? But appropriation isn't a feeling, it's a relationship. So when we think of the difference between appropriation and appreciation, I want you to think of these couple of questions here. Because we have power, we have profit, there's credit, there's access, and there's cost. When we think of power, we are talking about who has more power in the room, in the market, and in the story. When it comes to profit, it's about who gets paid, who gets the bigger promo, and who gets the brand deals. With credit, it's who gets named as the source. It's very important. Who gets treated like the originator versus the inspiration. With access, is who gets to do it without permission. Who gets called too much for doing the same behavior. And then costs, it's simple. Who gets policed? Who takes the risk? Who gets punished when the culture becomes a moral panic? If you take nothing away from today's episode, take this sentence. Appropriation is when the culture is available, but the people are disposable. Keep that in your pocket. Because now we can talk about the Jack Harlow interview like adults. Don't drag me too much in my comments, okay? I mean, you can. Just go for it, but you know what I mean. Let's have fun. Again, context first. Because I don't want us arguing about the headline that Jack Harlow said he got blacker, okay? I want us talking about what is being signaled. So, for context, Jack Harlow went on the New York Times podcast. I know, say that like 5 times. Talking about his new album, Monica, and why he leaned into R&B. According to Huffington Post, the write-up of the interview says, Harlow describes the choice like this: I got blacker. I love black music. I love the sound of black music. And also HuffPost reports him framing it with kind of political self-awareness. You know, he says, and I quote, I'm hyper aware of politics today. The safer landing spot that a lot of my white contemporaries have found. Now let's slow down a bit, because I can already hear the charitable interpretations. Somebody's gonna say, at least he's acknowledging black music. At least he's not acting like he invented R&B. And listen, I agree with you. I'm not even mad at that. Because credit matters. Naming the lineage matters as well. But here's why the wording still rubs me the wrong way, though. When you say I got blacker, you're not just describing this as a particular sound. You are describing blackness, inadvertently, as a setting you can turn up, a flavor you can intensify, a vibe you can accessorize, and a personal evolution you can claim. And blackness isn't a plug-in. It's not more bass. It's not more swing. It's not more church chords. Blackness is a people, a history. It's a set of conditions that come with cost. So the phrase sounds like cosplay because cosplay isn't just wearing something. Cosplay is becoming a character. And in this situation, the character here becomes the black artist. Now I want you to notice the second quote too. The one about being hyper aware and the safer landing spot. That part is actually a real admission. Because white rappers and singers often get to switch up their genres more often than their black counterparts. They can pivot in and out, and that gets framed as being versatile. Meanwhile, black artists get boxed in. Black artists get policed. Black artists get told they're too specific. Now, I want to bring up a really important point or person to this point. You remember K. Michelle? The music industry tried to label her as just an R&B artist when she wanted to do country music. But she has said numerous times that she loves country music and she grew up on country music. But at one point, the music industry was like, no, girl, we just want you to sing love songs and talk about how Idris Elba, like, you love him. Right? Like, even though we love those songs too, but we also love K. Michelle's country music. Remember, she had a whole college scholarship for yodeling. Like, she is country music. But that's a prime example of what happens when black artists want to change up and pivot. They often get put in a box. Whereas someone like Jack Harlow, he gets praised for being versatile. But with the Jack Harlow situation, he's naming a real dynamic. And then he follows it by claiming he got blacker, which makes it sound like blackness is a setting you can switch off and on in the studio. Jack is not taking a risk here, y'all. And that's 100% cap. That's not happening. But if blackness is something you can enter for authenticity and exit for safety, that is literally the definition of unequal access. And that's why the backlash wasn't just people being sensitive. No, HuffPost also includes rapper-producer Terrence Punch Henderson Jr., and he asks the question, got blacker is wild. How exactly does one get blacker? And you know, honestly, that question gets right to it. Because the issue isn't you love R&B. The issue is what kind of entitlement sits underneath the language like, I got blacker. Is it influence? Or is it acquisition? Or is it even respect? I'm gonna let you decide. And once you see, then you start seeing the same structure over and over and over, especially across history. When people hear critiques like this, the immediate reaction is to treat it like a personal accusation. Like, so you're saying white people can't do this? And honestly, I can already hear the comment sections now. I hear the critique, but it feels like it's policing art too hard. Music and dance move across communities. If someone is doing a dance and not mocking anybody, why can't it just be appreciation? The Jack Harlow line was cringe, but I don't think it proves appropriation by itself. It seems like people are projecting a whole history onto one awkward phrase. And that makes the conversation feel unfair sometimes. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is America has a long history of turning black culture into a product and then rewarding non-black people for delivering it in a form that feels safer to the market. And the examples matter because they show the pattern is not just one artist being awkward. The pattern is a business model called minstrelsy, which was the original mainstream black cosplay. We have to name minstrelsy because it's the black print. Minstrelsy wasn't influence, it was theft with a smile and a lot of face paint. White performers in blackface built entertainment empires by turning black life into caricatures. What they did culturally was train the public to think blackness was a performance, a spectacle, a set of gestures, and a commodity. So when modern artists talk like blackness is something you get, they're hearing an echo of an old idea. Blackness as something you can do, not something you live. This is kind of like, the cover era, keep the sound but swap the face. Yes. In the early rock and roll era, black artists were innovating blues, early rock, R&B, but the industry's move was simple. Take the song, give it to the white performer, push it harder, pay the originators less. Because the market wanted the innovation without the social cost. That is appropriation in its cleanest corporate form. Elvis, to me, is the example that comes to mind. And yes, I'm sure Elvis had his influences, but we can't negate the fact that he built his early sound and look by copying black performers, then got treated as the safe mainstream face. Elvis's stage moves and vocal style was heavily shaped by the black artists he watched and listened to. The difference is that he could do it nationally on television and be called electric instead of being punished for it. The system rewarded him with radio play and TV opportunities that black originators were denied. In the 1950s, remember, many stations and venues were segregated, and black artists were routinely blocked from the same promotional lanes. Elvis could bring black-derived rock and roll into white living rooms because he was a white body delivering it. Black songs and styles became bigger money once a white artist delivered them. So essentially, Elvis's breakthrough era sat inside an industry pattern where black innovation was treated as raw material, and the biggest checks often went to the white acts who made it marketable. So why did the culture crown Elvis as the king while black artists who shaped the sound were treated like a footnote? Well, that's because calling Elvis the king of rock and roll didn't just praise him. It positioned him as the origin point in mainstream imagination, even though the musical DNA came directly from black people, from black gospel, blues, and R&B. Now, that's not about taste, that's about access. And to be clear, the critique is not Elvis listened to black music. The critique is that the industry turned black creation into a ladder for white stardom, while black artists faced the costs of policing and the closed doors. Then in the 1960s, a lot of the British boy bands openly cited black American blues as their influence. Sometimes they were even more vocal about it than the American acts. But the structure still held though. White artists become global icons, black blues legends often got uneven pay, late recognition, and less protection. We can even talk about Vanilla Ice as an example because the industry sees rap music and rap money and immediately starts looking for the version it can sell to the masses. And it's not even subtle though. It's how do we make this feel safe to people who want the sound but are nervous about blackness. Now I know what you're thinking, because if we talk about Vanilla Ice, then essentially we have to talk about Eminem too. Now, Eminem complicates the situation and he complicates the conversation because I know if you think of it in the history of white rappers, the first white rapper that normally comes to people's mind is Eminem, Slim Shady. But he complicates the conversation because the skill is real, yes, and the cultural roots are real, yeah. But even here, the system shows its hand. Whiteness becomes a multiplier, and the story becomes, look, here's an exception. Meanwhile, black artists are excellent every day and still have to fight for basic recognition. So the question isn't, does Eminem belong? The question is why whiteness becomes novelty inside black creation. Then we have Iggy Azalea. And the critique about her wasn't a white woman is rapping. It was that the performance that she did heavily leaned on black southern aesthetics, the accent, the cadence, But when people asked for accountability, the conversation got defensive, messy, and even dismissive. Appropriation is often the moment when people want the aesthetic without the relationship. It's essentially you want the seasoning, you just don't want to be in the kitchen. Or you want the seasoning on the side, but you know what I mean. Yes. Then we had Miley Cyrus, whose pivot leaned heavily into black culture. And then later she distanced herself from hip hop culture as a whole by describing parts of it as too vulgar. Essentially, I'll use blackness to get hot, but I'll call it trash when I want to be respected. Yeah. But we also see this appear in our daily life, though. AAVE becomes Gen Z slang. Clock it, period, right? Black dance becomes TikTok trends. And you see it in real life with people like Nate. You remember? The white guy who went viral doing the Tanashi dance, the nasty girl. I'm really nasty. That one. When he's like winding his hips and everything. And everybody's like, oh my God, the white boy can dance. Look at Nate. Oh my God. And he literally went viral overnight. And everywhere you go, he's doing the little dance, right? But it wasn't because he invented the move. No, because he was winding his waist. Black people have been doing that for years. And it's not because he built the style. But because when white bodies do black dances on platforms, the algorithm and the audience often treats it as more palatable, more fun, and more worthy of mass attention. Meanwhile, the black dancers who were behind him, who set the language, got copied, undercredited, and then quietly pushed out of the spotlight. Black humor becomes relatable content. The origin gets erased, but the social capital stays. So yes, this keeps happening. It is a pattern. And once you see it as structure, you stop getting distracted by whether one person's wording was cringe, whether Jack Harlow said I got blacker or not. Because the cringe is the tale. It shows what the system thinks blackness is for. So, to answer the question, is it appropriation or expression? When white artists adopt black aesthetics or black sound, it can land in a few different buckets. Bucket 1 is exchange with accountability. This looks like you name the lineage, you collaborate in ways that share power, you invest back, and you're accountable even when it's uncomfortable. Then we have bucket 2, which is brand strategy. And that looks like you treat blackness like a credibility upgrade, you benefit from proximity, but you avoid the costs. And then bucket 3 is the erasure. That looks like you borrow the sound and you talk like you invented the feeling, but you distance yourself from black people while keeping the profit. And the I got blacker line, especially paired with the safer landing spot, reads like brand strategy language to me. So I would put Jack Harlow's comment in bucket 2 because it frames blackness as something you can choose as a direction, not a people, not a history, and not a cost. So Jack Harlow, I suggest you do better. Choose your words next time. And let's not say you got blacker, because I don't think there will ever be a world in which you, Jack Harlow, will ever get blacker. You just need to realize what you say. But sidebar, the new album, Monica, I gotta give it to you. It's actually a really good album, though. If you were to if you would not know that it was Jack Harlow, right? And you would just listen to it and not knowing who the person is, you would assume that this is a black person. There's not even there's no shade. You would think that this person is black. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know. So essentially he did get blacker. But in the grand scheme of things, it's still wrong to say, but he does sound much blacker though. It's weird. You have to listen to the album, Monica, and you know what I'm talking about. But it's very weird though. It's weird. Okay, but I do want to pivot though, because I want to pivot to film because I think this is what happened at the Oscars. I think it's very telling because I know that I was up in arms. I did an exhale when Michael B. Jordan won for Best Actor. I exhaled because in my heart of hearts, I was like, they're probably going to give it to Timothée Chalamet. Duh. Okay. But when they didn't, I was like, oh my God, yes. And there's been some backlash about Michael B. Jordan and why he won. And I saw this comment where somebody was like, oh, well, the other 5 black guys who won Best Actor, they got it because they were really great. And Michael B. Jordan got it because he was a DEI hire. But you would think that would be a white person who said that. And I'm going to put the comment up here. I'm going to put it because I think it was a tweet. You would think a white person did that? Nope. Guess who it was? A black guy. And that's a conversation for a different day. Like, that's a whole different episode when we'll talk about the coonery of it all. Like, I'm not even going to get into that. But pivot back to the film, because I want to show you the same logic shows up when the medium changes. Ryan Coogler, unfortunately, did not win Best Director at the 98th Academy Awards. Boo! Tomato, tomato. Yet, Sinners was the most nominated film of the night. Sinners entered the night with the record for the most Oscar nominations for a single film, with 16. But it did leave with 4 awards. Ryan Coogler did win for Best Original Screenplay, Michael B. Jordan for Best Actor, Autumn Durald Arkapow for Best Cinematography, and Ludwig Göransson for Best Score. So what happened? Why didn't Ryan win? Because that was literally on everybody's mind. Especially, and what I mean by everybody, I mean all the black people. Because collectively, it was like, what the hell happened? And I remember when he didn't win, what I thought. And I had to write it down. Because here's one way we can think about it. The industry will praise black excellence as long as it's legible through a white lens. As long as whiteness can still feel like the emotional home base. But when a black creator makes work that doesn't translate itself for white comfort, when it doesn't center whiteness, when it doesn't ask for permission, that's when the gatekeepers get weird. So essentially, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, this is literally 100% my opinion, Ryan Coogler did not win Best Director because he did not direct a film that centered whiteness. One battle after another, that one won the Best Director because that main character was Leonardo DiCaprio, a white guy. The film centered whiteness. That's why. So until we get more people in the Academy, like voting board, who looks like you and I, we're not going to see the recognition from like a director perspective, that we're not going to see it. And unfortunately, Sinners is a really great movie. It goes beyond horror. And I'm literally going to do a whole episode about what the impact of Sinners and what it did for the culture a little later on in the season. Be on the lookout for that. But essentially what it says is they'll nominate, they'll applaud, they'll even call it important. But when it's time to give out the crown, they'll reach for something safer. Because awards aren't only about craft. They're about what the industry wants to endorse as universal. They're about who is treated as the default human. They're even about whose perspective is allowed to be the camera. And that brings us to the theme of this episode. Because the same system that rewards white artists for performing blackness often resists black artists who refuse to perform whiteness. I'll let you sit with that. I know, I'm good. Black culture gets treated like a costume when the market rewards imitation more than origin. I got blacker isn't just a clumsy phrase. It's a window into a world where blackness is treated like a commodity. When black creators make work that doesn't center whiteness, the gatekeepers often find a way to applaud without handing over the crown. Now I want to hear from you. When you see a white artist adopting black aesthetics, what tells you it's appreciation and not appropriation? And what do you think accountability should look like in real life? Not just in captions and not in the interviews. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Trust me, I will read them, and your comment may actually appear, and I may talk about it on the next episode. But remember, this has been Blk By Design. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a single episode of Blk By Design. If you're listening to this, rate the show, give us 5 stars. Until next time, pattern breakers, remember, stay sharp and protect the culture. Bye.